All right, so here we are, Infosec Decoded number 22, not a match. And Kaitlyn starts with beavers.
Yes, we have the CBC as an article here about a very Canadian loss of internet. A beaver chewed through an internet cable, very important internet cable, and a bunch of Canadians lost internet access. And that's really the entire story. But I just found this so amusing that we have these issues where you just have a small little beaver, small little animal, just chew through one cable, and then suddenly, all these customers, about 900 customers, no longer have internet.
Yeah, it makes sense. Beavers are used to chewing through a whole tree. So when they find like a cable, they probably figure it's just a root and let's chew through it.
Yep, exactly.
You would think it would happen all the time.
You would think so. It doesn't. And I don't know how long it took them to get it back up, but yeah, no, that's something you have to think about when you don't have redundancy in your network. A beaver can lock 900 people out of your network, off the internet.
All right. And Scott Galloway's got his blog, No Mercy, No Malice, and he's written a very good blog, which I thought was very interesting, talking about the three big threats in our culture, which are what he calls virgin homicides, crypto versus US dollar, and obesity. And he's actually pretty smart this time. He's not all, I don't always agree with him, but he's pretty good this time. He talks a lot about how people have quit having sex. There are various people worried about this. There was another woman talking about how it's probably due to plastics pollution, but the number of people who have never had sex at like age 30 is now like up to 30%, which is very high. And he said, there's nothing more dangerous than lonely, frustrated men with no job and no mate. And they become like these incels, and he shows lots of things, more drug-related, more overdose deaths, more violence, and the fact that young people, as we know, really can't get much of a job. We're all noticing the young generation is having great trouble getting a reasonable job, and so they just sort of go crazy, which is a reasonable attitude. I don't know if this is really head up by real social scientists, but anyway, I was glad to read his article about crypto because he's starting to sort of push crypto in his shows, and he's a very influential guy. And like you say, I think crypto is now inescapable. But anyway, one thing that I really like is a chart of the M2 money supply, and it looks like the CO2, which is what's worrying me. Both the right and the left, over the last 5 years, have agreed that all we have to do is just spend incredible amounts of money and not raise taxes, and it will just never cause a problem. And I'm very dubious. And he has the M2 money supply that shows it was 2 trillion through the 90s. And then by 2010, it was 8 trillion. And now it's 20 trillion and going up just like the hockey stick. And, this is why, I like what Biden's doing in social programs, but I don't like the fact that he's not paying for it. And it used to be Republicans would pretend to pay for it, and the Democrats would actually tax people to pay for it. And now they both decided to just not bother paying for it at all. And that can't be good.
So we're talking about the debt though, right?
Yeah, we're pretending that there's no tomorrow and we can just run the debt up forever and there won't be any consequences. And they're all saying because inflation isn't high, it's not a problem. And I don't believe that.
So one of the things about the debt that makes it a bit more complicated is that you have to understand what we're borrowing the money for. If you borrow money from the bank to buy a new TV, obviously that's not a good investment. If you borrow money from the bank to start a business or to do something that benefits the economy as a greater whole, that is a good investment. That's a good idea. And so not all loans are essentially the same. And much of the money that the American government is loaning to itself or taking out as loans is going into infrastructure, is going back into the economy to boost up the economy. So it's not as dire as we're just borrowing all this money and how are we going to pay it off? There's a much more complex component to deficit spending than simple in and out.
Well, I'm interested to hear that. What I'm hearing now from Democrats is what I used to hear from Republicans. Republicans say by cutting these taxes, we'll grow the economy, and that will make the debt a smaller piece of the pie, which is not true. And now the Democrats are saying by doing these handouts, we'll grow the economy, and that'll make it a smaller piece of the pie. They're both pretending that you don't actually have to pay it back at all. You can just grow the economy to where it doesn't matter. And I'm very dubious that you can possibly do that this fast. Anyway, we're going to live and find out.
Yep.
Anyway,
I mean, I haven't heard many economists recently claim doom and gloom over the
no,
yeah.
no, they certainly aren't. And, this is also at the end of the French Empire. This is what happened. They found economists that would tell them you can just borrow and spend with no problem. And it is what caused them to crash. There are people that are willing to say that. Anyway, I hope they're right, because now we don't have anybody that cares about the debt at all in government. Anyway, so Elizabeth has got, the software that sent postal workers to jail.
Yeah, this story is crazy. So, I mean, it's not crazy that there's malfunctioning software. We all deal with that every day. Essentially, and I did a little digging into this. Essentially, what happened was that in England, in the UK, I should say, because it didn't specify if it was only in England, but in the UK, there were a slew of postmasters, at least 40, probably quite a few more than that, who had been tried, convicted, and sent off to prison over this malfunctioning software. And I had to, the articles that I found didn't really explain what the software was or how it worked. And one of the surprising things about this is that it was made by Fujitsu, which isn't a fly-by-night, no-name company. They definitely are a massive global enterprise that makes a lot of products that are used every day in businesses. And what this software was intended to do was to make welfare benefits payable from through the post office. So there was a large amount of money going through the system, but there was a problem, which it malfunctioned, and it made it look like postmasters at these post offices had taken lots and lots of money, and in some cases like $100,000 worth of money. And some of them tried to cover the shortfalls themselves with using their own money. Some of them even took out second mortgages on their houses, which is wild. And some of them couldn't cover this shortfall or alleged shortfalls and went off to prison. And so now they're finding out, hey, we might have made a big mistake here. There is a major problem with the software. These folks really didn't steal this money. We'd better let them out of prison. And I think that this is a really good example of why we need to be really careful about using software products to try and convict people, especially without doing a whole lot of due diligence.
Oh, yeah.
Which doesn't sound like it was done in this situation. I mean, what blows my mind is that it seems that no one reconciled the books against the software. And I would love to know more about what caused that failure, but none of the sources reported anything about that.
I see they're saying this is the largest miscarriage of justice that the UK has ever seen. And boy, this is peanuts compared to America. I mean, an individual forensic examiner was responsible for like 500 false murder convictions by just faking the evidence, and the drug cops just plant drugs. And man, 39 people in prison and 500 people with financial damages is not even hardly worthy of a front page article around over here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. And I imagine we're going to see more of this as we go forward, and we're increasing our reliance on automated software systems and other sort of things that are looked at in an evidentiary sense as being proof positive.
I think this is the huge issue of our age, is this imposter syndrome future shock thing, where technical people invent something and a bunch of authority figures and other people around there don't want to admit that they don't understand it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. And then Irvin's got the new apples.
So this is actually a different take on those new apples, and an interesting point. Apple is putting the M1 on a lot of their devices, and they're almost putting it on all the devices, which is putting into question Intel and AMD's thing. They sell you different chips with different speeds and different abilities. And Apple is kind of throwing this in their face of we can have one processor to do all that fits all the possible scenarios. So it's definitely throwing the model of Intel and AMD into question.
And what's the point of a weaker processor? To save power?
Save power or cost less. Whereas
this one is apparently more efficient, saves power, and it's faster, right?
Right. That's what Apple's bringing into the reality of there can be a processor that is not only low on power and heat consumption, but also delivers quality work. So how does Intel and AMD reconcile their i5 with like 6-10 different options and how do they reconcile that now when Apple is showing they can run their one processor on various devices and it all works?
So one of the reasons we have, for example, like different versions of like the i5 and like the i7 and i9 is because silicon fabrication is hard. And a lot of times they'll design dies with like, 10 CPUs or 10 cores. And what will happen is that 2 of the cores didn't come out right. And so instead of labeling as or selling it as an i9, they disable those cores and sell it as like an i5.
So it's cheaper.
So it's cheaper. You get the cheaper, you don't get the cream of the crop that came out of the oven, so to speak. And also the other thing about Intel architecture is that it's very legacy dependent. You can still run DOS 1.0 on the latest i9. All that code's still there, all the 16-bit code, all the 32-bit code, and all, of course, the 64-bit code is all there. It's just this huge legacy processor. If they had to redo it again, I'm sure they could, get a much more efficient design going. But
that's a big thing about Apple. They just don't support anything more than 2 versions back, which is a huge cost saver, but it makes it very inappropriate for business use.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. And then, so NASA's helicopter. Yeah, why don't you tell us about this?
Right. So NASA's Ingenuity helicopter on Mars took its 3rd flight. And this time it went about 150, I think, about 150 feet in north. So it traveled about half a football field. And so this was the first like real flight. So before it sort of took off and landed to make sure it wouldn't, explode or there were any problems. But this is the first time it actually went somewhere. And it has performed really well. I'm really surprised. I took a look at the hardware of that, and it turns out they were like using parts you would buy from like SparkFun to like build this multi-million-dollar helicopter for Mars. And I was totally expecting there to be problems and stuff. But no, this thing has been a trooper. It's really a testament to the ingenuity at NASA. And
they did an over-the-air update from Earth, right?
Yep.
Which took like a couple days.
Yeah. No, it's so the way the over-the-air update works is that the data gets sent through the Deep Space Network to Mars orbiters. The Mars orbiters then send it to the rover, and then the rover then sends it to the helicopter. So
like email.
Yeah, it's like email. It's like a giant chain of it's like the game, what's it called? Not Mailbox, where you whisper in someone's ear.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. I hope there's good integrity controls, because they can't really call the certificate authority for validation.
They cannot. Yeah, no. This is what makes security over, light seconds very difficult.
Well, I would, if I was going to do it, there would be a shared secret at the other end. It's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, that's the only way you can. And most of the stuff nowadays, all the modern stuff is encrypted.
Yeah.
But there are ways around it.
Oh, I'm sure there are. Yeah. That's the thing.
Because you can't have the encryption failing on a thing and then not having access to your device.
Yeah. And
that's all I'll say.
And man in the middle is kind of easier over that distance, I would think.
I mean, easier is
okay.
Relative. You still have to get up into space.
Yeah, but our enemies are up there in space.
They are up in space, and then you would have to I don't know how you would intercept a radio signal before it gets to the destination, because it's spread out so wide. But I suppose there's a way to do it.
What I would do is have one satellite putting out noise to block it and another one listening.
That's definitely one thing you can do. You can. I seriously doubt there's much controls over interference, but
Yeah, there can't really be. Yeah, anyway.
well, I mean there can, but you're just talking about such distances and such. Like I said, every time you add a complexity to something this, where you can't fix things, it's just another point of failure potentially.
Yeah. And so anyway, we now have a malaria vaccine that works, which is something we've been searching for forever. Apparently, malaria is a huge problem. They say it's what's actually going to kill the most people after global warming. We'll have more swamps and more mosquitoes and more malaria. And they now have a malaria vaccine that is like 75% effective. And I didn't know this. If you give 450 toddlers in Burkina Faso a vaccine for a year, by the end of a year, more than 100 of them have got malaria. So you don't need a bigger sample to see if your vaccine works. And that's terrible, because I think malaria just lives in your body forever and just sort of drags you down. And it's sort of like lead in the pipes. It's a really bad thing. So that's why I think the real experts on human medicine are really, really, really interested in curing malaria. On a global scale, it is a huge problem. So this is, hopefully this will pass the future tests and be a great improvement in the world. All right, Liz, we are not a match.
I thought this just made me smile, this story. This guy got busted for taking part in the Capitol building riots because he decided that he was going to get on a dating app called Bumble and started bragging about his exploits to one of his prospective matches on this app, and she wasn't going for it. She was not impressed and went ahead and turned him in to the FBI, and he got totally busted, which I found pretty amusing. And
So he bumbled on Bumble.
He bumbled on Bumble. That was a major, it's usually best not to go bragging about your crimes online. And these people have really been doubling down on doing that because they're super impressed with themselves. And I mean, and this guy had been bragging about it all over his Facebook profile. And I mean, not dealing with very smart criminals here.
As far as I understand, this is how it works in the animal kingdom. The man brags about how wonderful he is, and usually the woman slaps him and walks away, but occasionally it works apparently. Roosters do this. They stand up and say, "Roar, roar, 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 here I am, I'm the greatest ever." That's how it works.
Yeah, well, it didn't work on this prospective date. She was not impressed and turned him into the cops, which I thought was pretty good.
Yeah, well, you're taking that risk. Yeah. All right, and so the EFF would like the government to stop undermining our encryption.
That is the whole article, is them saying, hey, bug Congress to tell them not to use our tax money to go after encryption. It's been that long-standing battle of having a backdoor into it, all encryption methods or not, and the EFF has obviously taken the side of don't touch encryption, leave it be, even if it's used for criminal purposes. Encryption is encryption. Yeah.
Well, there's always two sides.
There's always two sides.
What the NSA has done is poison the standard encryption to make it weaker. And that seems like a bad move.
Just a bit.
But, they do, of course, have some reason to intercept some communications.
Right. It's criminals using it.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Go on.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the NSA, we went over this before. The NSA spent millions of dollars intercepting all our communications, and there's really not much to show for it.
Well, yeah.
I like that thing from the Simpsons movie where they go into NSA and one guy listens to Marge and the kids talking, and he said, "We finally got one."
Oh, yeah, well, that is an interesting issue. And since everything they do is so secret, we don't really know how effective it is. Supposedly, monitoring our enemies is of some value, although it certainly seems to me over the last 5 to 10 years, I've seen a huge propaganda push to make us angry at China, to make us want to go to war with China when I don't think we really want to or China really wants to. And I think you could argue that even our foreign activities against our so-called enemies are really nothing more than propaganda to distract people against bad government at home. If we were actually at war with the Nazis, then I think everyone would agree that we really want to break into their encryption.
Yeah.
But in the current world, it is less clear that we're actually benefiting things. Anyway, then we got a deep fake video chat.
Yeah. So Engadget has an article about politicians who were tricked in a deep fake video chat. Essentially what happened is that Netherlands politicians got on I guess a Zoom call or something similar with someone impersonating a Russian opposition leader named Alexei Navalny.
Yeah.
But of course, this was all deepfake. And previously, most articles talking about deepfakes were looking at things like YouTube videos, things that were sort of static and put up there. But apparently, this can be done in real time. And that is quite worrisome. If you can change your voice and change your appearance to look like anyone, I mean, tricking people into thinking that you are someone else is, I'm not going to say trivial, but definitely much more doable than it was in the past.
Yeah, although I don't think anybody really knows if it was a deep fake. It could have just been an actor wearing makeup, but they were impersonating Alexei Navalny's staff. And this is really important because Alexei Navalny is the only opponent that could hurt Putin.
Right.
Which is, and our government is supposedly, they let him have medical treatment, but they've outlawed his political committee. So all the people that are protesting have to stop, or they're really going to lock them up in Russian jails and kill them too.
Yeah. So it turns out these filters I've been using from Snap Camera could actually be kind of with a bit more advancement, could be actually pretty malicious.
Well, I would think so. And besides, if you're just going to fool a politician, it's not like it has to be perfect or anything. You're just fooling an individual person who isn't expecting it.
Right.
Yeah.
I look at my flowing hair.
Yeah, yeah. You could. You're not going to fool too many people with that one, but you could probably make yourself look like Donald Trump with a filter or something. Anyway, this one I thought was amazing. I mean, EC Council has been famous idiots for decades in the world of security, and they posted some offensive survey about why women have trouble in security. Oh, there you go. Oh, man. Oh, there's Kaitlyn. That is really seriously not convincing. Maybe if you work a little bit on the right expressions. Anyway, Anyway, she complained on Twitter and said, you jerks have insulted women. And they first tried to deny it and lie and abuse people. And then they gave in, and they're going to try to improve their treatment of women and their non-discrimination and stuff. And it looks like eventually when the hacking community, prominent people in the hacking community called them out for being sexist, they've decided to actually reform, which is not what I expected. I mean, they've many times just doubled down like Trump on being wrong, but apparently the pressure has reached the point where EC Council is supposedly going to reform. Now, I do know we talked about this before, like Google and Facebook, where when they reform, they hire someone, and then when they actually try to change something, they just fire them. So we'll see what happens. But it's a step in the right direction anyway. And then Liz has got, oh yeah, Dan. Yeah, Dan Kaminski died.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is pretty sad news that hit us over the weekend. We lost Dan Kaminski way too young. And he is going to be already sorely missed by the hacker community. He was a wonderful person that I had the privilege of getting to know a little bit through the DEF CON family. And the world owes a debt of gratitude to Dan on so many levels. And you know, much has been said about what a wonderful person he was, but I felt that, you know, this is pretty big news. He was one of the 7 ICANN key holders as well, and which is largely ceremonial, but you got to be a pretty awesome person to be a member of that group, and he was. And you know, he was definitely a luminary in the InfoSec community, but I cannot imagine a more down-to-earth person. He didn't care if you were a total nobody. He would still support you and try to encourage you as much as possible. And that's something that I really respect.
Yeah, yeah. He was always nice to me. He corrected me when I was wrong. Everybody loved him, which amazed me. I mean, the hacking community is really fractious. There's a lot of feuds and cliques and arguments. And I never found anybody that didn't love Dan. There were some people that were jealous of him. But I remember on Twitter, people were mourning his passing. And one guy said, well, I didn't get along with him. I said, man, you're the first. I never found anybody didn't get along with him. He was a really nice guy. He was also always the smartest guy in the room. And I remember
Always,
you could be
never
that, except it was justified. Yeah.
It not only was it justified, but he never approached from a position of arrogance. Even though he was the smartest person in the room, he never acted like it, which was also one of his really admirable qualities.
Well, I think a lot of people were jealous because they would do things like just give him 2 hours to say whatever he wanted at major cons like DEF CON and B-sides. And he doesn't even need to go through the CFP process or anything. And so, you know, you could be jealous that he is like way above all the rest of us. But the fact is he really was. It was not unjustified. So, yeah, what a shame. I knew he was young. It wasn't until I saw this article.
Well, he really was, but I mean, yeah, I was really surprised by that as well. He was definitely like wise beyond his years, I think. But you know, one thing that really made an impression on me was that even if he was telling somebody they were wrong and explaining it why, he never did it in a nasty or a rude or a condescending way. And you know, even
looks like we lost you. Yep. Liz has quite a few of us have bad internet connections, but I think Liz has the worst.
It was probably a gopher.
Oh, that must
That's probably a gopher.
That's the only explanation, of course.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Irvin's got a competition winners.
Yes.
I think
Wait, is that Liz back?
It looks like Liz is trying to return.
Ah.
yeah, the beavers are eating my internet.
Yep. That's what Kaitlyn said. All right, so Irvin, what was this competition?
Oh, so this competition was our second regional event. We have 2 every academic year. This time I changed the rules around to allow multiple teams to come together to form bigger groups. Because normally our competitions are just teams of 6. So this time I let them merge together to form monster teams and let them pick the time to participate. It's the contest centered around Kubernetes and keeping vulnerable systems up for 72 hours and surviving madnesses. It was tough to get kids to participate, but then again, it's been tough with school being online and them doing so much work from home and scheduling and whatnot. But we had a couple teams play, or a couple of big groups play, and the winners from the interview, because everything comes down to the interview for my contest for those soft skills. The first place went to Santa Rosa, and second place went to San Jose, and third to San Francisco.
All right. Well, I think that's it. Make sure I'm not skipping anything. No. Okay, good. So we'll be back Friday.